series going from John 14 through John chapter 17. And these are the final moments that Jesus has with his closest followers before he would be crucified. In John 14, we stepped into the upper room and we listened in as Jesus had a conversation with his disciples around the table for the Last Supper. That's John 14. And then John 15 begins with them leaving the room and they step outside and they go for a walk. It's in the cool of the evening. The disciples don't know where they're going, but Jesus knows. They're going to the Garden of Gethsemane where he will be betrayed by Judas and he will be arrested. As they're walking, Jesus is trying to think about what needs to be said, and they're walking along these ancient vineyards, and so he uses the vine and the branches as a memorable metaphor, as a picture that his followers can keep coming back to help them understand the kind of relationship he wants to have with them, that he is the vine and we are the branches. In him, John 15 verse 5 says, we can bear much fruit, but apart from him, we can't do anything. Now, this is especially significant for these disciples because they were gonna be a part of changing the world. I mean, they were gonna turn the world upside down. So how do they do that? As a handful of followers, how do they do that? And Jesus wants them to remember the way they do that, the how is through him. It's through him that they will bear much fruit. And so verse 1 of chapter 15 begins with Jesus saying, I am the true grapevine and my Father is the gardener. And so the word I want to draw your attention to is the word true. Jesus says, it is through me that the fruit comes. And if he's the true grapevine, that lets you know that there are some imitation grapevines out there that promise change, that promise to produce fruit, but they can't. They're limited. Jesus alone is the true grapevine. And some of his followers were frustrated because they wanted to change the world. They wanted to bring about justice and overthrow the oppressors, but they didn't like the way Jesus did it. I mean, there's no doubt Jesus wanted the same thing. He came to turn the world upside down, but the way he did it is what people had a problem with. He wasn't doing it how they thought it should be done or how it had always been done throughout history. And this is in large part, I think, why earlier in the evening, Judas had enough of it. Like he just couldn't do it anymore and he left to betray Jesus. But he wasn't the only one. A week before all of this happened, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. We call it the triumphal entry. And in the triumphal entry, people were ready to crown Jesus as king. They wanted it to be his coronation. And Jesus, in their minds, would come in and he would change the world this way. Through power, through politics, and through position. And it just became clear over the course of that week that Jesus wasn't gonna do it that way, that he wasn't gonna have a political platform. And when they realized he wasn't gonna take a position of power, most of them were out. I think Judas was probably somewhere between frustrated and disgusted when he saw Jesus on his knees washing the feet of the disciples, because that's not what kings do. And if he was gonna change the world, he didn't need to be washing feet. He needed to be sitting on a throne. Judas wanted Jesus to hold a scepter, and Jesus chose a towel. And the people wanted him to change the world by retaliating. Jesus was so good with words, and they knew Jesus could take out their oppressors if he wanted to. He could put them in their place. But the Bible says that when Jesus stood before his accusers, and they're yelling at him, they're spitting in his face, they're berating him, the Bible says he was silent before them. They wanted him to curse the Roman oppressors, and yet Jesus spoke words of grace and forgiveness. They didn't deserve it, but Jesus gave it. And so in John 15, as Jesus is preparing to leave the disciples, he wants them to remember that his way is the way, that he is the true vine. It is through him that the change the world needs will come. And if you settle for an imitation vine to bring about change, you're going to be frustrated. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that a lot right now. And we're seeing that in our community. I know many of you watching this are watching this from one of our campuses, or you're watching this online and you live in and around the city of Louisville, and there's just a lot of tension. And people are exasperated, even more than that. But many people are enraged, and everyone wants things to be different. But the question remains, how? How do we do that? And how does that happen? What vine is going to bring about that kind of fruit? Well, we try the political approach. And certainly, politics matter, obviously, and there's a reason why Jesus didn't go into government. There's a reason why he didn't turn his disciples into politicians. The political vine is not the true vine. And we can try to bring about change and bear that kind of fruit through power. We can try to force it. We can try to legislate that kind of change. And certainly that matters. Absolutely, there are times when laws need to be changed and when reform is required. But the kind of change that you know this, but the kind of change we really need now is heart change. It's heart change. And the legislative vine can't do that. It's not the true vine. So, in this season, we must not forget what Jesus wanted his followers to always remember. He is the true vine. In him, we can bear much fruit, but apart from him, we can do nothing. As a church, he is our one true vine. Every week, I hear from people, I know, well-meaning people who want us to try to connect to some other kind of vine, some kind of vine that promises change. I get lots of emails. I got so many calls and texts that I changed my phone number. Not to mention Facebook groups that insist, hey, the church needs to join this group. The church needs to stand on this political platform or make this kind of statement or sign this petition or endorse this candidate or renounce this policy. And some people ask nicely, and others are more threatening. I tend to believe, though, that it's because so many of you care that you're frustrated with the way things are in our world. And I get that. But let me say what I've already said, and will no doubt say again in the months to come. And I know some of you don't like this, but as a church, we are doubling down on Jesus. Our hope is in him. And some people will say to me, well, that's a cop-out. No, it's not. We're putting all our weight on Jesus, not because we're looking for a cop-out, but because we are sold out. And that means our go-to is the gospel. It always has been. As a church, it always will be. Our creed is the cross. You want to be a part of a movement that changes the world? I do too. And our movement is his mission. He is the one true vine. We are the branches. In him, we will bear much fruit. Apart from him, we can't do anything. And so that promise is our platform. Our mantra as a church is be the branch. In him, we can bear much fruit. That means that we're going to stay connected to Jesus no matter what. And I believe in seasons like this, being the branch means that we're going to be spending a lot of time in prayer. So as a church in the upcoming weeks and months, we want to come together in prayer like never before, where we express our dependence on God, when we express that it's through Jesus alone that we can experience the kind of transformation that this world desperately needs. So let's look at John 15. We'll just start in verse 1. I'm going to read through this here. Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers, and such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, Jesus says, you're my true disciples. This is how you know that you're my true disciples, because you're producing fruit. This is how you know someone's connected to the vine, because there's fruit being produced in their lives. And Jesus says, this brings great glory to my Father. So in John 15, Jesus begins by saying he is the vine. And then he speaks of three different kinds of branches. We talked about the first two branches last week. First, there is the branch that isn't bearing fruit. They're connected to the vine, but they're not bearing fruit, presumably because they're on the ground, and without some help, those branches on the ground will get mildew, and then they'll become diseased and die. And these are the weaker branches, and these branches need some help. And the gardener sees these branches, and what's he do? We saw this last week. He picks them up out of the dirt, he cleans them off, and then he intertwines them with some stronger branches for support. And last week I challenged many of you who are watching online to get connected to some other branches. If you're not ready to attend on the weekend at one of our campuses, or you live outside of this area, then get plugged into a group. Even if it's an online group, get plugged into a group. As a church, we're committed to connecting you to Jesus, the one true vine, but we're also committed to connecting you with other branches. We all need that. There's part of us that thinks we don't. Like, we like the independent approach, and I can do this on my own, but we need each other. It's one of the reasons I'm excited that tonight we're launching our new community campus in Beachmont. You'll get to hear more about that in the weeks to come. And for those of you who live in Bullitt County, I want to give you an update on the launch of our regional Bullitt County campus. A few weeks ago, they had an outdoor gathering. They met together at a park, and more than 400 people came to the Bullitt County campus outdoor gathering. They even had a baptism that night. I got to show you this picture. I love this picture because she wanted to get baptized, and they were at a park, and they didn't have a baptistry, so somebody's like, fill up the stock tank, and she got baptized in a stock tank. I want to let you know that the launch of this campus is scheduled to be October 4th, so it's coming right up. Our Bullitt County campus is going to be meeting in the East Side Middle School. You can find out more information on our website. Be praying about that God would use that new campus to connect unconnected people to Jesus and to one another. So to grow fruit, we need to be connected to the vine. We need to be connected to other branches. If you find yourself in the dirt, if this is a season where some mildew is starting to show up, and for some of you, I mean, that's, you can smell it. God wants to pick you up. He wants to clean you off. He wants to connect you with other believers who will support you and encourage you. So there are the branches that are connected but don't bear fruit. And then second, we read about branches that are bearing fruit. So what happens to those? Well, we saw this last week. Those branches get pruned. They get pruned so that they can bear even more fruit. And if you remember, Mr. Miyagi explained it to us last week, that pruning has a purpose, that pruning is done with a picture in mind. And so the challenge for us in seasons of pruning, which we're in, is to trust the picture that God has in mind. When my youngest daughter was around 4 years old, she came outside one day and she saw me trimming the shrubs and or bushes. I don't even know. They were overgrown. They were a little too bushy. And so I was outside trimming them, and she came out and said, well, what are you doing, Dad? I think kind of what she meant by that is, I've been alive for 4 years, and I've never seen you do manual labor. What's this about? And so I had a pair of hedge trimmers. I was trimming these shrubs, and I'm not particularly good with hedge trimmers. Never had any formal training or experience. So it wasn't going particularly well. Like, have you ever gone to get your hair cut by somebody, and you're looking in the mirror while they cut your hair, and they're trying to make it like even, but they cut off a little too much here, and then a little too much here, and a little too much here, and a little too much here, and it's just getting worse and worse. And that's kind of my relationship with trimming the shrubs. They're just quickly going down to nothing as I'm trying to make them even. And so I tell her I'm trimming the bushes, and I explain to her the pruning process, and she she says, just with pure sincerity, she said, "Dad, would you make me an animal out of the bush?" And I wasn't sure what she was meaning, and then I remembered, like, she's probably thinking of the shrubbery at Disneyland, right, where you have these master, I don't know what they're called, trimmers, and they turn these bushes into animals or to Disney characters. This is what she's thinking of. She wants me to make an animal out of the bush. I said, "Well, what kind of animal do you have in mind?" And without missing a beat, she said, "An eagle." And I'm staring at the bush in front of me, trying to, channel my Mr. Miyagi and get that picture in my mind. It's not. There's no way that bush is going to look like an eagle. So I don't want to disappoint her. I said, "Well, how about I give you two options? You choose one. Either a hedgehog or a roly-poly." And she went with roly-poly. When I was finished, she told me it looked more like a hedgehog. But I love that my daughter believed that I could sculpt an eagle out of shrubbery. I mean, that was the kind of confidence she had in me with pruning shears. But it was clearly misplaced, right? And whenever pruning is taking place, we get uneasy. Like, are you sure you know what you're doing? But we can have this confidence in God because he's pruning with a picture in his mind. And we can be pruned with the confidence that he knows what he's doing, so we don't have to resist it, and we don't have to just accept it, that we can actually ask for it. He is the master pruner. The third type of branch that we're talking about today is in John 15, and these are the branches that are not connected to the vine. These are the branches that are on the ground and they're not connected to the tree. And Jesus describes those branches in verse 6. And he says, "Anyone who does not remain in me as the vine is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. And such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned." They're thrown in the burn pile. And Jesus says, once a branch is no longer connected to the vine, then what's it good for? Yeah, you pick it up, throw it in the fire.